Yes, I think we'll be in the 600,000 range.
A lot of us still question that the numbers that Pierre Poiliev has claimed, but regardless, if he's confident in the memberships that he's sold up, why would he not want them to hear other perspectives?
That was Ian Brodie off the top, the chair of the Conservative Leadership Organizing Committee, and leadership hopeful Patrick Brown, both speaking to Power and Politics today. The party announced record-breaking membership numbers. What do they mean for the Conservatives? What does it mean for Pierre Poiliev, the perceived frontrunner? It's Thursday, and at issue is here Chantal Hebert, Elamin Abdelmahmoud, Althia Raj, and Andrew Coyne. Good to see all of you. Althia, I'm going to start with you on this. Obviously, over 600,000 members is a lot. What does that tell you about the level of enthusiasm, the state of the race, and I guess the claim by Pierre Poiliev that he's got half of those numbers?
Well, I mean, I don't have a way of independently verifying whether or not what the Pierre Poiliev camp is saying, but what they are saying is that they've sold over 311,000 paid membership, and that the party's base on which they started was about 140,000. So that is, like, really, frankly, an insane number. If you think back to 2013, when Justin Trudeau and the Liberals had a leadership race, he won that contest with 105,000 members voting, or supporters, as the Liberals call them. And these were people who got to sign up to join the party for free. So it is huge. It is fantastic news for the Conservatives, the fact that more than 600,000 Canadians decided that they were so energized by this race, whether it was because they wanted to vote for Pierre Poiliev or they really wanted to help defeat Pierre Poiliev, which is, anecdotally, I'm sure we've all heard lots of people, Liberals, New Democrats, Greens join the party because they don't want Pierre Poiliev to be the Conservative leader. It's fantastic news. Now the real challenge is, can they get the people that they signed up to vote for them actually cast a ballot for them? But on the face of it, it looks like this is Pierre Poiliev's race to lose, and that he could easily walk away with it on the first ballot.
It's interesting, Elamin, to see the way everyone's sort of framing the numbers, putting forward their own numbers, suggesting that other teams aren't telling the truth about their numbers. But we do know, regardless of where they are situated, as Althia says, we can't independently verify, it is a big gain for the party if they can turn those members into voters.
Right. I mean, the first surprise was Patrick Brown coming out with his numbers, and he said he signed up 150,000 people. And, to my mind, when I first saw that number, I thought that's damn near a first ballot victory. And then Pierre Poiliev's numbers came out, and it was like this sort of just like a truly awe-inspiring kind of figure. I think there is a lot of questions that sort of remain at this point. One is like, where are those votes located? Because that matters a lot in the Conservative leadership race.
That's right.
It really matters which ridings you have those people located in. Whether it's Erin O'Toole or Andrew Scheer, they both won the leadership by having quite a concentrated sort of new member sign up in a relatively small number of Quebec ridings, for example. And then the other thing is just the logistics, the sheer logistics of processing 600,000 new members. I mean, I don't know if the Conservative Party has the capacity to process that in time, because that's a lot of literally people putting information into computers. And I think there will be a lot of questions about whether they can sort of keep up with that capacity. But on the face of it, as Althia said, it's extraordinary news in terms of how engaged people are with this race.
What do you think, Andrew?
I'm not entirely sure it's such great news for the party. That number, when you look at where those memberships are coming from, that's a measure more of the intensity of the support than the breadth of the support. So much of that is Poiliev's doing, and he is aiming his message at such a narrow slice of the electorate that, they're very excited. They want to come out to fight against vaccine mandates, et cetera, but I'm not sure that translates into breadth of support at election time. Also, it's a crazy way to choose a leader. The people who are going to decide this race, as in other races like this, are going to be people with no history of involvement or commitment to the party or interest or understanding of its ideas. It's just people who were recruited en masse in the fever of a campaign race, of a leadership race, who may or may not stick around for more than 5 minutes after the leader is chosen. No doubt, if you looked at it today, if the vote were held today, probably Poiliev would be the winner, although it's hard to tell. I mean, the numbers are pretty overwhelming, but even so, when you have to win a proportionate share of 100 points in each riding, when it's a ranked ballot, there's some measure of uncertainty, and there's a lot of time between now and voting day, and he's got to sustain the enthusiasm of his followers so that they don't just sign up today, but show up a month or two from now to vote.
Yeah, Chantal?
I think Pierre Poiliev is in for the longest 3 months of his political life. It is one thing to sign up people. It's quite another to get them to vote. And look at last time, out of 270,000 some, 100,000 never showed up to vote. So he needs to keep them energized until September 10th, if that's the case. And to keep them energized, not all of them signed up because they were anti-vaccines or others. He has entered the territory of diminishing returns. That is, whatever steps he takes to keep some on board, he stands to lose others. It's just because you sign up people doesn't mean they will vote for you. Final thought, it is the strategy of the Poiliev camp to look unbeatable so as to discourage either Patrick Brown or Jean Charest from going to the vote. And that would be a winning formula. At this point, it hasn't worked. But those numbers are put out there to make the others think that they should quit.
Yes, of course. And do we think he can continue? He can hold that momentum for 3 months, Althia? Because it is hard. And I would imagine some of the issues he's talking about, too, could dissipate, evaporate, or just disappear altogether.
Well, I mean, we've seen a challenge with that on the Bitcoin front. For example, when he started talking about Bitcoin was riding high. And when it started crashing, the message about everybody going out to buy Bitcoin really kind of sounded completely out of touch. So, yes, it is a challenge. I think another challenge, frankly, is not just, discouraging a third debate from the party or trying to continue that show of force, is that, frankly, he's been running on a message of freedom. And in order to vote for the Conservative leadership race, you have to prove your identity. So how many of those members are going to be comfortable photocopying their government ID, sending it over to Ottawa to get verified? I mean, I don't know that there is going to be that many people who really care passionately about that message, who are willing to give their private information to a political party. So I think that there's probably even other things that we're not thinking about that come to front of mind that might prove to be a bit of a challenge to keep at least that number up come September 10th.
Chantal, then Andrew,
When Stephen Harper fought Stockwell Day for the leadership, he leaked, quote unquote, that Stockwell Day might win. Why did he do that? To make sure that people who did not want Stockwell Day would come out to vote. The danger with Poiliev's strategy at this point is that he's basically sending the message, don't worry, don't send in all this information because I've got this in the back. And that could backfire.
Andrew?
Well, we've talked a lot about Poiliev, but we should talk about a couple of the other candidates. If you looked at the body language and the statements they've been making, you have to say that Jean Charest is at best in third and maybe in fourth in memberships. That bodes ill for the strategy if it was that of him coming in ahead of Patrick Brown, then Patrick Brown's supporters going to him. And it's not clear that if Charest's support went to Brown, he'd have any chance of overtaking Poiliev. So this has to be very disappointing for somebody who was a former federal cabinet minister, former premier of Quebec. You'd think would be very close to being a contender, and at this point doesn't look like it.
Elamin, and then I can see Chantal wants one little last word. Yes, Elamin, quickly.
I think it matters not just how many members you sign up, but also when, because I think, frankly, all Conservatives are looking at that Doug Ford victory here in Ontario, and they're thinking, maybe they're thinking differently about how they'd like to position a particular leader. I don't get the impression that Pierre Poiliev is going to become somehow more centrist and more retail politician the minute that he becomes a Conservative leader. I think actually he might intend to run on the very platform that he's advancing right now. I don't think he's going to switch that. And it's true that the attention on him in the next 3 months is going to be quite intense. It's even more true that it's going to look quite stark in comparison to Doug Ford and the ways that he sort of ran with a very managerial, very economically focused kind of message. I'm not really sure that the membership can stomach that. So we'll see what happens with that.
Chantal, you get 20 seconds.
Final word on Jean Charest. He's already won this campaign on a personal basis. He entered it with Quebecers looking at him as someone who was under investigation. Now people who don't even like him are cheering for him. And that's more than you can ask for if you're Jean Charest and you're his age and with his career.
Redemption is also a pretty good thing.
Why did the minister repeatedly fail to give Parliament accurate information, or was he just hoping he wouldn't get caught?
It was the responsible thing to do to invoke the Emergencies Act, and if you want to be a government, you got to know how to protect Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That's what we did.
Fire exchange and question period today. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino is still defending the government's use of the Emergencies Act, even as his deputy minister told a parliamentary committee that no one from law enforcement asked the feds to invoke it and tried to explain what the minister meant. So how is the government defending the move? At issue is back. Chantelle Elamine, Andrew, and Althia. Andrew, why don't you kick us off in terms of how you think the minister is explaining the use of this Emergencies Act?
Not at all well. The issue has shifted from the decision to invoke it to what the minister has been saying about it, because the minister's story has changed. Through the first few weeks and months of this, he was saying repeatedly and clearly that they made this decision on the advice of law enforcement. Never said who, but law enforcement on their advice. Then in this week, after several police or a couple of police chiefs said, no, we never asked for that. They sent out his deputy minister to kind of change the story, to road test a new story, which is, well, actually what he meant was they asked for the powers. Well, those are contradictory statements, and they're not particularly plausible either one. The first, because the police chiefs have denied it, and the minister has backed off on it. And the second, because it would suggest that the police chiefs asked for the powers without ever mentioning the Emergencies Act itself. And then when we were asked about it in the committee, said, well, we didn't ask for the act to be invoked, and never said, but we did ask for the powers. And it's not particularly plausible. It certainly means that the minister has some questions to answer. I think he should be hauled back before the special committee to answer them. I think they should get the police chiefs as well. But let's be clear, if the minister knowingly misled Parliament, that's a resigning offense. Ministers cannot lie to Parliament on a question of fact like this and expect to keep their job. So he's in more than a bit of hot water and certainly has some explaining to do.
Okay, Althia, you spoke to the minister recently.
Yeah, we launched this podcast called It's Political, a little plug there. And I spoke to Marco Mendicino last week about this. So I see it a little bit differently. I think what he's really saying, and two part to this, I think the minister has a tendency to exaggerate. We saw that in his opening remarks to the first committee, Public Safety Committee, in which he was talking about, basically, he was painting the picture of this being like our January 6th, and that all these protesters were going to storm the House of Commons, and they were here to overthrow the government, and this was the reason why we had invoked the act. And I think initially, when he said that they had acted on the advice of the nonpartisan law enforcement, he never said specifically that they asked for the act. He has consistently said that. No, I agree with you, Andrew. I think that in saying what he said, he's misleading people. He's giving people the wrong impression. But when you parse his words, and that's what we get paid to do, he's not specifically lied. He's left an impression that I think is incorrect in people's minds. Right. But you also would find it very troubling, I think, if law enforcement, the RCMP or the OPP said, we need the Emergencies Act, and basically dictated to the federal government what it should do. I think that there were gaps that the law enforcement identified that the government sought to respond to.
But
more
to be clear,
importantly, though, it was a political response to something that is a policing problem. At the end of the day, I think there are huge questions to be asked, and I hope the commission is at least going to look at the advice and the intelligence. How is it that we got to a situation where the cops at all levels were not doing their job, and it seemed like the only thing left to do was the federal government to intervene? Because clearly the act helped, but did it meet the threshold? That's the question MPs have to look at, and the commission, and we're not there yet. We don't know the answer to that question.
Except the government doesn't need the police to act in order to invoke the Emergencies Act. It's the government's decision to invoke it.
Yeah,
right.
Chantelle.
That's true.
True, but it must demonstrate with facts that no normal power of the police or whatever could have done the job. And if the minister is exaggerating, it's not just a style issue. It's a scrambling issue to put substance behind a decision. But this isn't just some capricious requirement. That is what the law says, that the government that uses it must be able to prove that it met the threshold. And if the threshold isn't met because the police didn't ask for it and you can't go for cover there, then show us other facts. or else Andrew is right. So far, it's been more misleading than informative, and it is a legal requirement.
And I should clarify that you know, in their attempts to smooth this over, you know, the language that they use is that it was understood that the act was required. That is not sufficient at all, and that is not the conversation that was had with Canadians when this act was introduced. Like, we were told, extraordinary circumstances, and the use of this act is the only way to get the situation under control. I think a lot of people were willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt in terms of going this additional step, even understanding that there are a lot of steps that the police had not been taking just yet. But I think on these revelations, going back to those words, those 3 words on the advice, those are heavy words. Those are substantial words that I think they have to substantiate. And the fact that they haven't yet is, frankly, a big problem for them.
Like 10 seconds, Althia.
I just want to make it clear for people, that is not the threshold. Whether or not they acted on the advice of the cops, it doesn't matter. That is not the threshold of them having the ability to use this.
But it matters in terms of whether the minister misled Parliament.
Absolutely, but that is not the threshold for the act. And there, maybe when we have more time, we can talk about what the thresholds actually are.
Well, it's not.
But if that's not the threshold, they haven't met the threshold with anything else.
Okay. Clearly, this isn't going away. Clearly, you all like talking about it. So we will again. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Good to see you.